Alright guys, it's official. Wizards of the Coast has brought back organized play and competitive play. Let's talk about what that means for Flesh and Blood. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to HometownTcg. You guys know me, my name is Josh, and unless you've been living under a rock for the past 2-3 days, you know that Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering have decided to revive the concept of organized play and the Pro Tour in the Magic the Gathering world. Now in this video, we're going to talk about kind of what that announcement was, how it affects us as Flesh and Blood players, and what are the next steps that we need to undertake as a Flesh and Blood community and as Flesh and Blood players that assure that we get to continue to grow and enjoy this incredible game. So starting with what the announcement was, again, you had to have been completely offline if you're a TCG enthusiast and you don't know what went down. But just in case, Magic the Gathering and Wizards of the Coast decided that they are going to bring high-level organized play back to Magic the Gathering. It was a couple of years ago that both Magic and Wizards decided that high-level organized play, organized events, and the Pro Tour itself wasn't for them anymore. They actually made a pivot to more of an esports-centric model. It was focused on Magic Online, even more specifically Magic Arena, and they dropped the concept of the Pro Tour or an organized pro play. Now this came with several other caveats. They weren't going to play pros anymore. There wasn't going to be, the content around it. They didn't have to pay vendors, stuff like that. But the main idea that we're going to focus on is the fact that they just dissolved this Pro Tour. And at that time, I truly believe Flesh and Blood made one of the best decisions that they've ever made. They looked at this amazing tool that Wizards of the Coast had at their disposal, and they said, if you're not going to use this incredible tool to interact with the card game community, we definitely will. And they scooped up the concept of a Pro Tour and they made a quick announcement. They said, you know what? If you're not going to have a Pro Tour, we will. Come one, come all, play Flesh and Blood and enjoy our Pro Tour. So there's some speculation that Wizards of the Coast then said, ooh, Flesh and Blood is having success with this Pro Tour, having success with this organized play. We can't have that. We have to squash that game. We have to go get it. And while that's interesting speculation to have, especially from our perspective of a Flesh and Blood community, it makes us feel powerful, makes us feel like we're fighting the king. I'm not sure that's actually what went down. I think Magic the Gathering had an opportunity to let other card games beta test how the community would receive opening back up and organized play again. And what this does is this lets Flesh and Blood kind of test the community response. Are people going to be upset that we're getting back in numbers while there's still, maybe some of the pandemic going around? People's, are a little concerned about stuff like that. Is the community even interested in paper organized play? There's been a lot of interaction online. There's been a lot of tabletop sim. There's been a lot of, MTG Arena and online stuff going on. Is the community still interested? And when that beta test, when Flesh and Blood picked up this mantle and other indie TCGs have picked up this mantle and everyone is coming back together and playing games and the community is receiving it so well, Magic the Gathering and Wizards of the Coast definitely took notice. So what they've done is they've almost taken a section of what Flesh and Blood does best and taken it back as their own. So as Flesh and Blood players, as members of the community, we are going to be silly if we don't think this is going to directly affect us in some way. Now, the way this affects us, it can be a wide range of things, right? Does this announcement just kill and crush Flesh and Blood? Absolutely not. Of course it doesn't do that, guys. People saying that, they're just being hyperbolic. It's a little bit insane. This announcement does not kill Flesh and Blood. However, we must respect that it does affect us as a community. And here's why. Flesh and Blood has had two major influxes of players, major points in Flesh and Blood history that have pulled in just tons of players, whether from other TCGs, whether from off the streets of their first TCG experience, whatever it might be. There's been two instances that have pulled people in. Now, the first instance is the idea, and it was leading up to Monarch, that you could buy this product, this amazing, this magical Flesh and Blood, and all of a sudden, you could be rich. You could turn tens of dollars into hundreds of dollars and hundreds of dollars into thousands of dollars and so on and so forth. Social media and various marketplaces blew up with this concept, and that brought a ton of people in. Now, there was an exodus from this, and we'll call that exodus the Monarch incident. Now, the exodus was not as large as the influx, obviously. In fact, I would bet to say it was a fraction of the size. But what happened was all these players, all these people came in, they got their Flesh and Blood product, they either made a couple bucks and were happy, or they were stuck with a product, especially if they got in around the time in Monarch, and they were either upset or they didn't know what to do. Now, there was a hook. There was a hook they didn't see coming, and that hook is the game of Flesh and Blood being incredible. So while a lot of these people might have come in and lost some money, they started playing the game. They got to experience what you and I experience on an almost daily basis, and they really fell in love with the game. Now, that's this first influx of players, and that influx came with a small exodus. Now, the second big influx of players is something I mentioned earlier in this video. It's when LSS and Flesh and Blood scooped up this mantle of the Pro Tour and said, you know what? We believe in organized play. We believe in in-person play. We're taking this. If you're going to put it down and not use it, we're going to use it, and we are going to organize some of the best events that I've ever personally been a part of. So Flesh and Blood has now put themselves into this lane of the organized play and competitive play card game. There's tons of opportunity in there. The game is still relatively new if you compare it to things like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and stuff like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for players to express themselves, to climb these ladders, and really show out at these events. But with this giant influx of people, a lot of people coming from this previous Pro Tour scene, this previous organized play scene that was dropped, now we have an opportunity for an exodus. Just like with the market influx, the player influx now has another Pro Tour they can go to. They have another group of organized play events that they can choose to participate in. So if we think that this announcement doesn't affect Flesh and Blood in any way, we are just silly. Now, let me make this very clear. I am not sitting here saying that every player that came in from Magic or from the drop of this Pro Tour is now on their way out the door. That is not the case whatsoever. However, we must respect there will be some that will go back to a Pro Tour experience and an organized play experience where they came from. So it's our job now, as members of the Flesh and Blood community, as LSS, and as content creators like myself, how can we continue to grow the game? How can we find this next influx of players? And I think you guys are going to be surprised by what I have to say about this. So I truly believe that a couple things need to happen to continue to grow Flesh and Blood in the face of some of this mild adversity of another card game kind of doing what we do. And that is, we need a foundation, a large and wide foundation that supports the everyday and more casual player. And here's why. The everyday and more casual player are the players that are going to make up the meat and potatoes of your game. Not everybody can be top 8 in the Pro Tour, and lots of people can strive for it. But more often than not, players just want to enjoy the amazing experience that is Flesh and Blood, and we need to find a way to support that. Whether it's a budget deck format, whether it's group play, something fixing and tweaking some ultimate pit fight, whether it's PvE, or whether it's things like finding a better way to bring in new players, really pumping these classic battles decks, really making sure that product is up to snuff and ready to go. These are things that need to happen to grow this gigantic foundation of casual players. Now, I know we talked about organized play and competitive play being under attack by Wizards here. However, that's not going to matter as much. As I stated before, I think Flesh and Blood does an incredible job. And LSS does an amazing job of setting up these events, picking the vendors for these events. It's super fun. It's interactive. The community is always a buzz around the time of these events. Those events are great. However, if we never get enough new players to be casual players, to be, kind of the foundation of our player base, we will have nobody that gets out there to experience those events. We have to respect that there's a juggernaut. There's a Monolith, there's a Goliath that is going to be marketing these exact same events. This Pro Tour, this organized play, they're going to be shoving it in your face. So we need to get people in our doors and say, give this a try. You must experience Flesh and Blood. You must experience a Flesh and Blood event. You must experience Flesh and Blood play. And that comes from a solid, in a very wide casual player base. So we need to bring those players in. We need events to support those players at these major events, at all of the callings. We need to be saying, hey, if you're a casual player, if you're a for fun player, we have events for you and you need to be here, because every 10 players that are there, 2 or 3 of them are going to get bit by that competitive play bug, and they're going to get in there and experience what the high level organized and competitive play has to do. And finally, the crutch of all of this is marketing. Flesh and Blood is now up against Magic the Gathering as far as organized and tournament play goes, which means if we don't market as content creators, as members of the community, and as LSS, if we don't push our game, if we don't say, this is the experience, this is why you got to try our game, this is what we can do to get you in the door, then nobody will ever experience the incredible events that LSS and Flesh and Blood have to offer. So we need to market the absolute crap out of this game right now, and that comes from all points. It comes from players, content creators, the company, members of the community, all of us. It's time to circle the wagons. It's time to band together. Make sure we keep growing. Guys, enjoy this time. This is where we have an opportunity for a giant influx of casual players, of good foundational players, making up new formats, trying out new formats. This is a very exciting time, but we need to be there to support it, and there's a lot of work ahead of us to do. So guys, if you got here all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much. Consider clicking that sub button. I'm on my way to 4K. I appreciate that. And then one more shout out that you can see. Shout out to MINMAX Games. The announcement's not official yet, but if you're here around to the end of the video, you get the spice. I am now partnered with one of the largest Flesh and Blood suppliers in the Midwest. I am partnered with MINMAX Games. If you need anything Flesh and Blood related, singles, sealed Flesh and Blood, whatever it is, you can find their link in the video description. And if you're stuck around this long, you get a spoiler alert, there will be exclusive Patreon benefits coming to patrons of patreon.com/HometownTcg when it comes to purchasing Flesh and Blood product, purchasing stuff like that for Flesh and Blood. I can't give away exactly what it is, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. So stick around, and if you want to support me, if you want, to maybe see some of those MINMAX game benefits coming down in the future, remember, visit me at patreon.com/HometownTcg. Follow me on the socials, and until next time, you guys know me. My name is Josh, and we'll see you around.